Well, it's Wednesday, and we all know that on Wednesdays I read from a beloved author. And I like to use slideshows and just read the stuff straight, but when it's longer, I can't really make a slideshow for it. This one is longer, and there's no slideshow for it. And I could have read any part of this book, and it would have been great. But I'm going to read the one that made me laugh the hardest. Here's the problem. I may start laughing while I'm reading it. I'm going to try not to. I practiced so that I wouldn't do it. But I still haven't absolutely made it through without laughing. Okay? This is from Tom Wolfe's wonderful, wonderful The Right Stuff. Actually, there are two books in this book. The Bonfire, the Vanities, and The Right Stuff. So, this is from a chapter titled The Operational Stuff. July 4th was not the time of year for anyone to be introduced to Houston, Texas, although just what the right time would be was hard to say. For 8 months, Houston was an unbelievably torrid effluvial sump with a mass of mushy asphalt known as downtown set in the middle. Then, for 2 months, starting in November, the most amazing winds came sweeping down from Canada as if down a pipe, and the humid torpor turned into a wet chill. The remaining 2 months were moderate ones, although not exactly what you would call spring. The clouds closed in like a lid, and the oil refineries over by Galveston Bay saturated the air, the nose, the lungs, the heart, and the soul with the gassy smell of oil funk. There were bays, canals, lakes, lagoons, bayous everywhere, all of them greasy and toxic, so greasy and toxic that if you trailed your hand in the water off the back of your rowboat, you would lose a knuckle. The fishermen used to like to tell the weekenders, "Don't smoke out there or you'll set the bay on fire." All the poisonous snakes known to North America were in residence there: rattlers, copperheads, cottonmouths, and corals. Now, there was no best time to be introduced to Houston, Texas, but July 4th was the worst. And it was on July 4th, 1962, that the 7 Mercury astronauts moved to Houston. For the prodigious effort that Kennedy's moon program would require, NASA was building a manned spacecraft center on 1,000 acres of cattle pasture south of Houston near Clear Lake, which was not a lake but an inlet, and was about as clear as the eyeballs of a poisoned bass. The astronauts, Gil Ruth, most of Langley, and the Cape personnel would move to Houston, and although the Cape would continue to be the launching center, the small scale and modest appearance of Langley and the Cape had somehow been perfect for the hell for leather masala phase that Project Mercury had just been through. They all knew Houston would be bigger. The rest they could never have guessed. They stepped out of the airplane at the Houston airport and started gulping the molten air. It was 96 degrees. Not that it mattered particularly. They had been assured that their entry into Houston would be easygoing and casual, Texas style. There would be a zippy little motorcade through downtown just to give the good folks a look-see. And then there would be a cocktail party with a few prominent local figures during which they could let their hair down and knock back a couple of long, cool ones or whatever and relax. Waiting there at the airport is a lineup of convertibles, one for each astronaut and his family with his name on a big paper banner taped to the side. So off they go in a motorcade, all 7 of them and their wives and children, except for Joe Schirra, who was still at Langley recovering from some minor surgery. Pretty soon they're moving through the streets of Houston at a good clip, and it seems painless enough. But then all 7 cars head down a ramp into the bowels of an arena called the Houston Coliseum. A bone-splitting chill hits them. They shudder and shake their heads. They are down inside some vast underground parking lot. The place is air-conditioned Houston style, which is to stay within an inch of your life. There's a whole army of frozen people waiting down there in the gloaming, endless rows of marching bands in uniform standing there like ice sculpture, politicians waiting in yet more convertibles, too cold to open their mouths, policemen, firemen, National Guard troops, stiff and still as lead, and more bands. Then they turn right around and head out of the underground parking lot, up the ramp, and back out into the blast of sunlight, 100 degrees of heat, and the asphalt, which was lying there heaving and rippling in the caloric waves. All at once they are at the head of a big parade through the streets of Houston. Well, not quite in the lead. In the lead convertible now is a Texas congressman, a rubicund fellow named Albert P. Thomas, an influential member of the House Appropriations Committee, waving a 10-gallon hat as if to say, "Look what I brought you." It began to dawn on the boys and their wives that these people, the businessmen and the politicians, looked upon the opening of the Manned Space Center as the arrival of the astronauts as about the biggest thing in Houston history. Neiman Marcus and all the other high-toned stores, the great banks and museums and other grand institutions, all the class, all the culture, were in Dallas. By Houston lights, Dallas was Paris, once you set your watch to Central Standard, and Houston was nothing but oil and hard grabbers. The space program and the 7 Mercury astronauts were going to make Boomtown respectable, legitimate, a part of America's soul. So the big parade began with Representative Albert Thomas's waving 10-gallon hat signaling the start of the redemption of Houston. The 7 pilots and their wives thought they had seen every sort of parade there was, but this one was sui generis. There were thousands of people lining the streets. They did not make a sound, however. They stood there 4 and 5 deep at the curb, sweating and staring. They sweated a river, and they stared ropes. They just stared and sweated. The 7 lads, each in his emblazoned convertible, were standing up grinning and waving, and the wives were smiling and waving, and the children were smiling and looking around. Everyone was doing the usual, and the crowds just stared back. They didn't even smile. They looked at them with a morose curiosity, as if they were prisoners of war or had come from Alpha Centauri, and no one was sure whether or not they comprehended the local lingo. Every now and then some very old person would wave and yell something hearty and encouraging, but the rest were just planted there in the sun like tar babies. Of course, anyone fool enough to stand around in the asphalt mush of downtown at noon watching a parade was obviously defective to begin with. The parade plowed on, however, through wave after wave of catatonia and rippling lassitude.